Public health is controversial. According to the Institute of Medicine, the mission of public health is to assure the conditions under which people can be healthy. While many of us take healthy living conditions for granted, many others are destitute and live in squalor and danger. The most significant factor in determining the health of a community is its socioeconomic status. Poorer people tend to be sicker. They tend to live in substandard housing or be homeless, be unable to afford healthy food, needed medications, and access to health care, send their children to poor and broken schools, lack connection to social services, be victims of child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, and neighborhood violence. Social reform, asserting the value of all human life, is an integral part of public health history. Social reformers in 19th century America fought for better housing and are still fighting that battle, for abolition of child labor, and for maternal and child health. Today, social reformers are campaigning for an increased minimum wage, for example, so that the working poor can afford healthy living conditions, nutritious food, and access to health care. However, not everybody embraces the concept of public health as a broad social reform movement. Some bristle at the idea of providing basic conditions for people who are unable to provide for themselves. They believe that people have individual responsibility to and for themselves, and minimal responsibility for the common good. Called market justice, this individualistic, go-it-alone capitalist ideology seems to predominate in the U.S. today, crowding out morals about the supremacy of all human life. In contrast, public health champions social justice. Social justice is the belief that all people are entitled to basic housing, employment, and a decent minimum income, education, and health care as a human right. Some people do not feel they or their government should be obligated to provide for the common good. Likewise, some do not feel that the government should have the right to restrict their individual freedom to improve the community's health. They object to what they call the nanny state and criticize such government actions as paternalistic. No one disagrees that individual freedom should be restricted when it involves directly harming others. Our laws and policies also tend to limit individual liberty when the action involves indirect harm to others. We have laws prohibiting smoking in indoor public spaces due to dangers associated with secondhand smoke. We have laws prohibiting drunken driving, as it threatens the safety of other drivers. Indirect harm to others can also include harm to our shared resources, our environment. While we have many laws restricting pollution of our land, air, and water, we as a capitalist society have conflicting opinions on the laws on fracking, for example. Scientific studies have shown adverse environmental and public health effects of fracking, but we are an energy-consuming, market-oriented society. Businesses and consumers are often anxious for the immediate economic gain from the mining of natural gas and overlook the longer-term health consequences for the community. In situations where an individual's actions are likely to cause harm to himself, government is much less likely to restrict his freedom. Smoking is hazardous to an individual's health, as is overeating for an already overweight or obese individual. Governments, schools, and workplaces have mounted vigorous educational and advertising campaigns to discourage such unhealthy personal indulgences and to influence more healthy behaviors. In the U.S., which has a strong penchant for individual liberties, behavior change can still be achieved through education and persuasion, if not by law and regulation. How we decide what is right or wrong and what we should do or do not do is based on our morals, which for some people do shift over time. A large percentage of the population received its moral training in Sunday school, though one could be an avowed atheist and still be a moral being. Historically, Christianity has prescribed certain sexual and reproductive behaviors, homosexuality and the use of contraception, for example. During the 20th century, these religious prescriptions came into conflict with public health concerns. Gays and women challenged them. In the early 1980s, homosexuality was considered immoral. It was stigmatized and forced underground by the weight of religious and cultural prejudice. In the first years of the AIDS epidemic, the Reagan administration chose not to as much as acknowledge homosexuality and the gay men's disease, thereby delaying treatment, containment, and research. Gays organized, raised awareness of the public health crisis, gained allies, lobbied Congress, and successfully received political and financial support to severely reduce and control the highly infectious disease. At the Vatican, the Pope announced in 2010 that the use of condoms would be acceptable if such use reduced the spread of HIV and AIDS in global hotspots. In the U.S., early 20th century religious morals and a culture of male domination led to federal anti-obscenity laws banning distribution of birth control information. Reformer Margaret Sanger saw the public health need for family planning and women's reproductive rights. She helped legalize contraception, which gave women greater health and independence through an increased control over their bodies, their families, and their careers.